How are you feeling about this show today, Adam?
I'm not nervous at all, Zach. I think it's going to be a breeze.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Formula, and Zach and I are here at the Formula 2 and Formula 3 support paddock here at Silverstone for a fantastic weekend. Now, if you haven't caught up on any of our content yet, make sure you're following FanAmp on all of your favorite socials, as well as Zach, myself, and Terry. We'll be posting everything that we've taken this weekend throughout the course of the next 3 days and all of next week, so make sure you check it out.
And make sure to get excited because we actually have a new mini league coming. So McLaren are hosting a new mini league, which will be running from Silverstone all the way through to Hungary. Adam, can you tell me a little bit about the price?
Absolutely. It's a VIP tour for two at the McLaren Technology Center. Also, second place is going to get a signed McLaren hat from either Lando or Oscar, and third prize is going to be just a regular McLaren hat. So it's a really great chance if you want to start over. If you've had a tough fantasy season so far, this is a great fresh start.
So Adam, can you tell me a little bit about how the betting lines are looking after that FP2? Because I think a lot of things have actually changed.
It's been an interesting few hours, Zach. So at this point, we had McLaren start the week in the top two, and they've stayed there, but then it's everyone after them that shifted. We started the week with alternating Ferrari and Mercedes drivers, but now both Ferrari drivers have shifted above their Mercedes counterparts, and Max Verstappen has slid in just behind the Ferraris. So we're at this point now where Red Bull's updated floor could be bringing Max a bit into the picture, and Ferrari's strong form in free practice 1 and 2 has brought them above Mercedes. So this is a debate we're going to have probably throughout the show today, is should we go with Ferrari or Mercedes? The betting lines say start with Ferrari.
And it's quite interesting as well because Charles Leclerc, out of the Ferrari bunch, is loved the least. So that home Grand Prix magic for Hamilton could be coming in quite strong.
Absolutely. And if Lewis was to have another great race, he won this race last year. He has 9 Grand Prix victories here at Silverstone. I think a driver of the day is inevitable, and tons of points. So I think for those teams that want a huge differential, Hamilton could be worth a shout, but I think for Zach and I, we prefer Oscar Piastri to start the weekend. So with Zach and I being here, we notice the weather can be very variable from day to day. You can have strong gusts of winds, warm weather, cool weather, and even a chance of rain. And we wanted to know how that impacts the drivers across all of the championships this weekend. So I sat down with Williams Academy driver Luke Browning to see how that's going to impact the strategy throughout the weekend. I want to talk to you a little bit about the wind, because I was just struggling walking around with the wind today. Drivers across the afternoon struggling with the wind. How do you manage the wind throughout the different days of the weekend?
Super gusty today, and obviously we know Silverstone's an old aeroplane runway and hangar facility, so yeah, naturally a lot of open spaces. The wind's very affected, you can see it's blowing my hair around today, and yeah, it made a big difference in qualifying today.
Absolutely. And sticking on the theme of the weather, I think it's going to get progressively cooler as the weekend goes on. How do you prepare for the changing conditions and the weather getting cooler?
It's always a little bit tricky in Silverstone to predict the weather. It can change very quickly, especially with this wind. It brings storm fronts in very quickly. So yeah, we're looking at a bit of rain possibly tomorrow and Sunday. So it could be dry, it could be wet, it could be in between. It's going to be an exciting one.
Does the cooler temperatures impact how you look after your tires, or is the strategy relatively the same?
Yes, definitely. So overheating we usually struggle with, which actually depends on the circuit, but it just means a little bit less management from our side, which is a good thing.
As far as overtaking goes on this circuit, is Silverstone one of the easier or harder tracks to overtake? Because this is a big point scoring category in F1 fantasy, so we're trying to predict what it'll be like throughout the weekend.
It depends if it's wet or not. If it's wet, you'll see a lot. If it's dry, if you've got a big pace advantage, you can overtake here. But naturally, you're probably going to pick up a bit of front graining. So if you're understeer limited, maybe not. It's going to be very car dependent. You might see probably some outstanding cars that are able to come through, and then others that are stuck. Let's see, DRS has a big effect, and also if we've got the same wind we have today, the DRS effect will be very powerful down that main straight. So if it's similar conditions, we can see a lot of overtaking.
Where on the track are the best places to overtake? Is there a preferred place for you?
Yeah, mainly into Stowe, so the second to last corner is probably the biggest opportunity after the DRS zone. Naturally it comes after a high speed section, so you might get put back a little bit. It's going to be very important to have a lot of confidence through there.
Walk me through the start of a race. There's always a lot of traffic going into turn 1. What are some of the things you look for as you try to gain places at the start, and how do you stay out of trouble?
The main thing is just to fill the gap. Here it's very easy because the track's so wide. If you don't fill the gap, you can get done by a few cars, whether it be outside or inside. So I think the main thing is have a good start and then fill the gap, see where we are. Usually the pack will bunch up then, and just try and stay out of trouble. But naturally here it's a long time waiting on the grid, as there's a bit of a Constantine effect coming into the last corner onto the grid. So there'll probably be some cold breaks on the outlap. So incident rate's quite high here on lap 1. So it'll be an interesting one.
There were a couple of big takeaways from Luke's interview that I wanted to talk about right now. The first is about that win. We saw drivers across all of the championships have a spin at some point throughout every session today. And he said also it could aid that DRS going down the main straight. So there's some pros and some cons to the win. So we've got to keep an eye on that as the weekend unfolds. The second thing too is the cooler temperatures. It's supposed to get much cooler tomorrow and Sunday, and we think that's going to mean a little bit less tire care, and that will bring a lot more teams like Mercedes back into the mix. So I like Mercedes potentially, if they look stronger in FP3 to challenge Ferrari. That was an interesting perspective from Luke here. And the last thing too is being careful heading down into turn 1. Luke mentioned this is a very incident-prone circuit, and of course we all remember the situation with Zhou Guanyu just a few years ago. So we'll have to make sure all of our drivers keep their nose clean, especially those Tier B drivers that we want to gain 0.6 million for us.
Now, luckily enough as well, we didn't only have Luke Browning, but we also had Callum Voisin coming to have a little chat with us. Callum, how are you feeling in the car? Any notes you can take?
I don't know. We struggled for pace, to be honest, in general. I mean, it's been decent. I think we would have been on for quite a good one, but we had a very tricky qualifying, quite unlucky in the last run when I think we were on for a decent result. So yeah, not mega, but F3 at the end of the day. You just got to keep going and pick up the pieces when you can.
Heading a little bit onto more of the F1 fantasy side of things, this weekend, the 3 big names that you can really choose right now are Piastri, Russell and Leclerc.
Piastri, I guess.
Yeah.
He's been performing well. He's got a good car. I think he's obviously an incredible talent. Been doing very well, especially this year. Seems to have got to grips with the car very quickly. And he's been consistent. He doesn't rarely ever makes any mistakes.
Kimi Antonelli coming into this weekend, he has a 3-place grid penalty. Now, as a driver yourself, just having that mentality of knowing that you're starting further down than the car should be, does that affect how you would go into a race?
In all honesty, not really. If anything, it kind of fires you up a little bit more. But no, I mean, I'm sure he'll be. I'm sure he'll be fine. Obviously, I mean, it's not ideal. Wherever he qualifies, you'll start three positions lower, so it's not ideal. But if he still qualifies in the top 3 or something, which he has done in the past, then he's still got a top 6 start.
Of course,
so, nothing's really lost. You just need to get a good start, and then you're more or less back where you started. So.
How about on the team side of things? Would you see any changes in strategy, or again, would it be status quo?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, strategy will probably be a little bit more different. I definitely think that perhaps from the team they'll try and do. I mean, I don't really know, to be honest, but some sort of different tyre strategy just to offset the fact that he's starting a little bit further back than expected. But at the same time, when you get a penalty, you just got to take it on the chin and do the best with what you've got. So
we were actually speaking to Luke a little earlier, and he was talking about the potential chance of rain coming inbound onto the track tomorrow. Could you give us a little insight onto how you're feeling?
Well, I didn't qualify very well, so rain would be pretty welcome for me. I'd take it with open arms. Last year I won the feature race here when it was damp conditions, so yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit of rain.
And then talking again on a team strategy situation, when would you say you as a driver and your team as a whole know when that crossover point would be from those wet tyres to slicks or slicks to wet tyres?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question actually. That it changes all the time. Very much depends on the wind, especially around here. I think last year we witnessed that it dries up extremely quickly around here, which is not really usual, I guess. Not compared to my prior experience, but it's something that we experienced last year. But then it changes for every track. Some tracks are more sheltered, you know, if they've got trees either side or something like that. You know, it takes a lot longer to dry. Spa, for example, takes quite a long time because it's quite sheltered with the forest around it. But then, yeah, as I said, around here it's pretty open, and you know, it dries up pretty quickly. So in terms of when do we know when to switch over to the crossover points, our Pirelli wet tires don't last very long in the wet. So I think whoever gets on the wet slicks first and gets, you know, is able to get enough tire temp to go quick enough is going to be the best. So.
And then quickly, just on a little bit of how the track is feeling. So of course, this weekend we actually have F1, F2, F3 and F4 all on the track. Can you tell us, all this extra rubber, does it really affect the cars that much?
It does. It grips up the track. In general, you got to be more precise because anything offline is then less grippier, or not so grippy. Sorry, it's better English. So yeah, no, it definitely makes a difference. You've got to be a bit more precise in the way you place the car. As offline, yeah, it's slippier. They've got more marbles on. And then yeah, it changes the balance of the car. Usually you tend to pick up a little bit more traction, a little bit more rear grip in general. So then, you know, we've got to preempt that before every qualifying session, and you know, I guess expect it and make changes to the car for it. So yeah, it definitely changes quite a lot.
And now, the key takeaways from here is Kimi Antonelli's 3-place grid penalty. Well, what do you have to say about it? Well, this is exactly what he said. He then said, basically, when a team has this sort of situation, nothing much changes, especially in the driver's perspective of the race. So their mentality very much is carry on exactly how they're feeling before, keep going, they know how they're going to play it. Now, it's slightly different on the teams. So he did mention that it could play a little bit differently for Mercedes, the different team strategy they could play, because yes, they're probably going to be lower down in the grid. But this actually sort of also links back to what we were having this conversation with Luke about, with the whole weather situation, where it is a little bit harder to overtake when it is dry. So if it's not wet, this will really hurt Kimi Antonelli and Mercedes, especially as a constructor, because if they can't make those overtakes up from the 3-place grid penalty, this completely goes into Ferrari's hands for them being the second best constructor this weekend.
I think this week FP3 is going to be especially important. Usually FP2 is the most representative session, but with tomorrow being a bit cooler, maybe a little spot of rain in the morning, it'll give us a sense of what Mercedes really have. If they're still behind Ferrari in the pecking order, there's nothing that would get me to bring Mercedes onto my team this week. But if they're ahead of Ferrari like they were in Canada after FP3, maybe that's the moment where we have to make a shift, because we made the mistake once, dare we do it again?
Yeah, and once again, it really is Mercedes versus Ferrari. Red Bull don't really seem like they're in it to win it at the minute. That new floor, like we mentioned, doesn't really seem like it's working. Now, I was lucky enough to get Voisin's thoughts on quite a few A-tier drivers for F1 Fantasy. And I have to agree, Piastri would be my choice out of the three of them as well. Now, one driver we didn't talk about, which we will get onto a little bit later, which is Lewis Hamilton, driver of the day potential. But I really do think Piastri, again, McLaren look like the safe bets for the win here. Probably a 1-2. Piastri definitely going to be in the mix with it. We saw it in Austria. Even if he's a little bit out of it in free practice sessions, he will be coming back. So 100% agree, Piastri still is my main choice for an A-tier driver.
I agree, and I think we're going to see a lot of people picking Piastri this week, because even last week in Austria, Lando Norris won the race, Oscar Piastri scored more fantasy points. So even when Lando is the right choice, he's still not the best choice in F1 Fantasy. So give me Oscar Piastri.
Now we'll take a quick detour over to the chips in F1 Fantasy, because again, it's another talking point this weekend, because do we use any, especially with rain looming? Like I mentioned earlier, do we use no negative? And I think from what we've seen around the track this entire weekend so far, and from what I've been thinking throughout the entire week as well, it doesn't look like it's a chip Grand Prix weekend. No negative. I really only want to use it when we know 100% there's going to be rain, and I think the coverage is just still too low. Limitless still looks best in Spa if you still have it, and the others all look like better options in the second half of the season. How do you feel about this?
I totally agree. I think there's not going to be enough rain to have a sustained impact on the circuit. And I remember Callum saying to you that this is a circuit that tends to dry quickly because there's not trees overhanging that still leave wet spots around the track. So I think if there's some rain, it'll only bring the temperatures down, but it won't induce a lot of DNFs or issues like that. Really, once you survive turn 1, I think we'll be in the clear. I would say, though, let's keep an eye out for final fix like we always do this time of the year. So if Verstappen or Hamilton, someone really out of the blue, qualifies on pole, it might be worth a shout to bring them in because maybe Red Bull have dialed in that floor. Maybe Hamilton has regained his home success here. So keep an eye out for that final fix.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that driver of the day points potentially looming. It's enough for me to consider him as well. And one other option you could use for final fix would be Lando Norris, and it is purely because he does look good here. He's first in FP2, as we saw. However, again, like in Austria, it's just his budget gaining that could be an issue. He still needs 50 points to go up 0.3 million, which for me is just way too much to put him in your normal team.
And just covering off the rest of the A-tier drivers, we haven't talked about George Russell yet, but I wouldn't run him as a 2x DRS boosted driver, maybe with a Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Mercedes, or McLaren B-tier constructor. Either one of those combinations would work, but again, we need to see Mercedes looking better in cooler conditions tomorrow to have a chance at that.
So then quickly, before we head onto our team selections, I am going to go through the entire list of everyone I think you should be bringing into your team, and if I do not mention their name, you should not be going near them for your F1 Fantasy. So like we've been mentioning in this video, Adam, quite a lot for the A-tier premium drivers, Piastri is the main one to go for. Now, however, if you want to go for a little bit of a differential who's easy to build budget, again, it would be George Russell or the Ferrari duo, Leclerc or Hamilton. Hamilton for that driver of the day potential, and Leclerc because he's looked better on pace so far. Again, go back to the final fix, looks potentially like a Verstappen, a Norris situation. Then over to the B-tier drivers, and we have the likes of Fernando Alonso, again, very good on points so far this season in the last few races. And then also, budget-wise, he needs negative points. And negative points are needed for the likes of Bortoleto, Hulkenberg, and Ocon as well. Realistically, he needs 0 to go up 0.6. But all 4 of those are absolutely brilliant, and you could still have a look at Behrman and Colapinto, but I would say be wary of them because there's better options elsewhere. Then over to the A-tier constructors, and again, McLaren, you really want to have them in your team. Every team should be built around the McLaren constructor. And then, from what we've seen, it does look like Ferrari, doesn't it? If you can afford, like we mentioned, the Piastri plus another A-tier driver builds with McLaren and Mercedes, then potentially you could look at having Mercedes, but I would say that is the last straw, only if you have enough budget for those teams. And then B-tier constructor-wise, it really does just look like Sauber. I think it's sort of like picking a name out of a hat. They're just too scrambled all over the place, and Sauber look like the safest option there. Adam, have I missed anyone?
No, I think we're all clear on this, Zach. I really like Sauber. If you can't pick between Ferrari or Mercedes, just go with the cost cap benefit. Sauber can absorb a DNF and still go up 0.6 million. There have been some other B-tier constructors that have come up, maybe the likes of Haas because of their form last week. But right now, betting lines have them P17 and P19, so they're very unkind at the moment. So maybe there's something we're missing there. So bringing it all home to our team selections, I want to go back to the ones that we shared on Monday's preview show. The first one we still like the most, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Alonso, Bortoleto, McLaren, and Ferrari. Unless FP3 tells us otherwise, I still like Ferrari over Mercedes, Piastri the best 2x DRS boosted driver, and then in this arms race for cost cap, I want as many of those B-tier drivers gaining 0.6 million as possible.
Yeah, it's literally got the best of every single world from the A tiers to the B tiers. 100% agree. This is most likely the team I'm going to be looking towards as well.
The second team is Piastri, Russell, Alonso, Hulkenberg, Bortoleto, McLaren, and Sauber. I do still like this team. Again, Russell's going to need to benefit from Mercedes doing a little bit better in those cooler temperatures, but you get out of that penalty of Kimi Antonelli if you were to run the Mercedes constructor. As for Sauber, they looked pretty good in free practice. Even Paul Aron, making his debut in that Sauber today, looked pretty decent in practice, so I do like them. And some teams may even triple up on them.
Yeah, and I think we both agreed when we sort of saw with this team, now after FP2, it's more of a thing of, if you can afford to get Russell up to one of the Ferrari duos, now which ones you prefer? It really is a 50-50 right now. Do you want to risk it for that 10 points on Hamilton for driver of the day? I do like it. I do like risking it for a chocolate biscuit, as you know. So potentially that, but I do think either one of the Ferrari duo does look better than George Russell this weekend. So that's the only thing I would tinker with that team.
And if Mercedes are really on it tomorrow in FP3, of course, you could do Piastri, Russell, Hulkenberg, Bortoleto, Alonso, Lawson, McLaren, and Mercedes. Really capitalizing in the way that many of us could have in Canada.
And I would say, again, like Team 2, realistically, if you can afford to go up from that Russell to the likes of Hamilton and Leclerc, I would do that.
So tomorrow we'll be back here in the F2 and F3 paddock during the normal time of our live show. So if you have a lineup that you'd like us to review, please leave it in the fan ant base, and Zach and I are going to do the best we can to get to all of those lineups before the lock deadline. And of course, check out our socials because we'll share our lineup in plenty of time so that you can make your decision too.
Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all for Spa.